right. Here we go. So the speech is called Ode to Rohan, but I mean, that's just because we have a friend named Rohan. It's not really about him. I wrote this speech when I was in a little bit of a different frame of mind, so it might come off a little different than I was hoping today, but we're going to go for it anyway. My speech today is about overcoming mistakes and overcoming failures, and that's a little bit more of a serious subject for me than I usually like to talk about in here, but I think it's worth talking about. I'm actually going to move this while we're at it. Yeah, that was a total ploy to get Bordick to clap. Yeah, so I know it might not come off that way to all of you guys due to my generally just sunny and shiny disposition, but I'm not always the happiest person in my life. And I only say this because that leads into why I've spent some time in therapy, which leads into where I learned this technique for overcoming a failure. Now, yeah, I said I've gone to therapy. We don't need to be weird about it. All right, therapy is not something to be weird about. It's actually a pretty awesome experience. It's like you go for an hour or 2 hours if you're really messing up. You get to kick back on a couch, prop your feet up, and just like complain about everything that's bothering you. It's awesome. And you'll even have good days where you get like kind of little self-serving, life-saving revelations. Like you'll be saying something and your therapist will stop you and say, listen to what you just said. And you realize, oh my God, I'm turning into my mother more and more every year. This has got to stop right now. So a pretty recent failure that I spent some time in therapy talking about was my last speech in this club last semester. Now, I don't know how many of you witnessed that beautiful debacle, but if you did, you know what I'm referring to, and I apologize. And if you didn't, then I don't know, you should be feeling pretty lucky about how you are right now. So the last speech really affected me. You know, I wasn't prepared at all for that speech. I didn't even write a speech. I just came in here and was like, you know what, we'll see how this goes. And not surprisingly, I was not able to just pull a miracle out of thin air. So I talked about it in therapy, and now I've got a sort of 5-step process for overcoming these mistakes. The first step is acceptance. You've got to accept the mistake that you made. Now that seemed easy to me at first. I gave a terrible speech. I knew I gave a terrible speech, and that was kind of the reality of that. I was able to accept that. But how we accept these sorts of failures is really, really important, and that's what I figured out as I was talking about it. I realized that I was accepting that the speech was bad, but that wasn't the real problem. You know, I was like, oh, I didn't prepare for the speech. Of course the speech was bad. But I wasn't realizing that the mistake wasn't the bad speech. The mistake was that I didn't prepare for the speech. So it took me a long time to sort of get my head around that concept. It seems simple, but when you make a mistake, make sure you're accepting the right thing when you look back on it. Sometimes the result is really irrelevant, and what led to the result is the problem you've got to look at. The second step to working past this is not comparing yourself to others and trying to remember that you are good enough. That one is hard. That's been a very difficult one for me after this speech because I've come here every week since then and watched people give really kick-ass speeches and had to remind myself like, oh man, I'm a total idiot. I can't believe I did that. So I found with that step, it's good after you make a mistake to try and just accept like any little confidence booster you can get. Like, oh, look at that, I made somebody smile today, or I made a joke in class and instead of my teacher telling me to stop being a disruption, she actually laughed for a little bit. Things like that are really important to hold on to. That and not comparing yourself to others. When you make a mistake like this and you're trying to get back to doing something good and not beating yourself up, it's really important if you can to try and put your competitive instincts to the side for a little bit, because you're just going to end up sort of driving yourself crazy about what you did. The third step I'd like to talk about is kind of taking your time to get back and try again at what you failed with. I did not come back up the next week and give a speech. I didn't come back up the week after that or the month after that. It's been probably 3 months since I've given a speech because that's just what I felt was my time. Now, some of you may want to get back up the next speech and get right back at it, and that's okay. You just need to take your time. That's the emphasis. The emphasis is on whatever time you need to accept, recover, understand, and then move forward. The fourth step for overcoming is learning to laugh at your mistakes. This is kind of the fun step. of this whole process. I've definitely enjoyed that part, and I've sort of been forced to laugh at my speech because pretty much every week after we leave this club, if I make a comment about a speech, Toastmaster Kimber will be like, hey, do you remember that speech you made? That was really, really bad, dude. So I had to learn through listening to him hound me basically for the last 4 months to laugh at my mistake. And yeah, maybe at first I was laughing just to avoid crying, but eventually the laughter just turned into laughter. And that kind of gave me power over the mistake. If you can learn to laugh about what you did, then it can't control you, it can't punish you anymore. And that's a really big step towards step number 5, which is try again. That's what we're doing here today. We're giving it another try. One of my favorite quotes, and it's weird how this speech keeps coming up in here, but it's from the last lecture, Randy Pausch. I believe you said it right before spring break. Yeah, it's a fantastic speech, especially with being in this club. If you guys haven't watched it, you absolutely should. I mean, it's really incredible. It's kind of a life changer. He has a quote in the last lecture where he says, "Experience is what you get when you didn't get what you wanted." That's one of my favorite quotes. And I think it applies to what's happened here. I definitely did not get what I wanted with my last speech. I can say that. And understanding the process and kind of the downfall after that has definitely given me some experience. And that experience is kind of what I'm offering to you guys today. And, you know, hopefully it might help a few of you in the future when life decides to hand you some experience instead of your desires. Thanks, guys.